Bhagavat Utama Shloke, Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtake, translation. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who's praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. And purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here is the remedy for eliminating all inauspicious things within the heart, which are considered to be obstacles in the path of self-realization. The remedy is the association of the Bhagavats. There are two types of Bhagavats, namely the book Bhagavat and the devotee Bhagavat. Both the Bhagavats are competent remedies, and both of them, or either of them, can be good enough to eliminate the obstacles. A devotee Bhagavat is as good as the book Bhagavat, because the devotee Bhagavat leads his life in terms of the book Bhagavat, and the book Bhagavat is full of information about the personality of Godhead and his pure devotees, who are also Bhagavats. Bhagavat book and person are identical. The devotee Bhagavat is a direct representative of Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. So by pleasing the devotee Bhagavat, one can receive the benefit of the book Bhagavat. Human reason fails to understand how, by serving the book Bhagavat, by serving the devotee Bhagavat, or the book Bhagavat, one gets gradual promotion on the path of devotion. But actually these are facts explained by Sri Narada Dev, who happened to be a maidservant's son in his previous life. The maidservant was engaged in the menial service of the sages, and thus he also came into contact with them. And simply by associating with them and accepting the remnants of foodstuff left by the sages, the son of the maidservant got the chance to become the great devotee and personality Srila Narada Dev. These are the miraculous effects of the association of Bhagavats. And to understand these effects practically, it should be noted that by such sincere association of the Bhagavats, one is sure to receive transcendental knowledge very easily, with the result that he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. The more progress is made in devotional service under the guidance of the Bhagavats, the more one becomes fixed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The messages of the book Bhagavat, therefore, have to be received from the devotee Bhagavat, and the combination of these two Bhagavats will help the neophyte devotee to make progress on and on. I'll read the verse again. Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavat utama shloke bhakti abhavati naishtake. Translation: by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who's praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne nirvishesha shunyavadi pastutyadeshatarane, vanchkalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this was a very important verse and very nice verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is describing basically the essence and elements in the level of nishtha in Krishna consciousness. I assume you're all familiar with the different levels, 9 levels, from shraddha to premonitions and obstacles within the heart, within the mind, from so many lifetimes in the material world. That's anatha nivritti. That's the 4th stage. Then 5th, right in the middle, is nishtha. Nishtha means steadiness. That having become engaged in service in the association of devotees and becoming free from so many obstacles and contaminations, one becomes fixed, one becomes steady in Krishna consciousness. And when one is steady and fixed in Krishna consciousness, then one becomes absorbed anytime. As soon as there's some chanting or some service, the devotee on the level of nishtha just becomes absorbed automatically. And then that absorption gives a very nice taste, very nice, very pleasant experience. That is ruchi or taste. And then continuing in devotional service very steadily with a nice taste, very nice experience from Krishna conscious activity, then one becomes really completely fixed. That's a sakti, then with like real attachment to the Lord. Then after serving like that for some time, then one begins to experience the beginnings of love for Krishna, and that is called bhava. And then after that, the sort of, you could say, the final stage is prema, pure love for Krishna. So this, though, is particularly talking about the level of nishtha, or steadiness, in that by regular engagement in hearing about Krishna and by serving the devotees of Krishna, then all those things held, sort of hung over from many, many years and many lifetimes even in this material world, they're practically completely destroyed. And then the beginnings of becoming really fixed in Krishna consciousness, that really begins. And as the translation says, that this being completely fixed, or basically fixed in Krishna consciousness, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Irrevocable fact means it's no longer, as what happens with devotees in earlier stages, that sometimes things are good, so one feels up, sort of higher and happier, but then somehow or other those bad habits kind of infiltrate again, and one goes down again, and then one comes out of it again, and some nice experience comes to some degree, and so one is up, but then again the old habits die hard, and one goes down into sort of some type of material consciousness again for a little while. So that's, up and down, up and down. While those anathas, those really undesirable things, they're still sort of hanging around. But as this verse describes, that by hearing, or the way it's expressed is, well, regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, or you could say in a general sense, hearing about Krishna, Krishna Katha, and then rendering service to the devotees, which means chanting your rounds and doing whatever your regular service is, and things like that, associating with devotees, then all those undesirable things which have sort of been holding you back, the verse says, all those things which are troublesome to the heart are almost completely destroyed. Not that they're just absolutely, totally destroyed, but they're destroyed strongly enough that a general type of being fixed and regularly engaged in devotional service starts to become established. Yes, and becomes established, and then that's nishtha, steadiness. Of course, just being on the level of nishtha, basic steadiness, is not the complete answer or the complete perfection, but it's a good step forward, very good step forward. So, as we read, the troublesome things are almost completely destroyed, but not completely, but to a large degree, yes. So if they were totally destroyed, and you're just completely 24 hours a day saw that, although it's very good, particularly compared to where one may have been coming from previously, from the very beginning stages, when you were really conditioned and so many bad habits may have been there and really sort of pulling you down from time to time and so on. So it's like an intermediate stage, but it's a very good intermediate stage. Like when you're learning how to drive a motor car, a very high level is you can drive in the Malaysian Grand Prix. And you can really take part in it. But that's very high level of driving. But on the other hand, when you begin, I may have mentioned to you all before, my first driving lesson, I was 13. My mother took me first gear. Now she said, slowly let your foot off the clutch. Stage, and the stage of being, a high-level expert, activities of different types in the company of devotees, it has a very profound effect, very profound, and very noticeable effect. That all those things hanging over from previously, they become noticeably reduced. And even sometimes they're just not there, although they have this tendency to creep back in. So anyway, that's the level of nishtha or steadiness. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur elaborates on each of these 9 levels in his book Madhurya Kadambini, which if you haven't read, you should read. But he mentions, interesting point, he mentions about the level of asakti. which is just before the beginnings of perfection, just before bhava, a sakti literal readiness, and so many of those bad. Ultimately the question, what to do? Prabhupada begins the purport. I don't know if you remember what he said. Do you remember? Anyway, he said, Prabhupada says, here is the remedy for eliminating all inauspicious things within the heart, which are obstacles on the path. So in other words, what that means is we should just continue. It's not that there's some magical trick, and then which you haven't been doing before at all, something different, and you just do that and suddenly, whoa, you're there. Not really. You just continue in the same ways, but really keep trying to apply yourself more carefully. And as you just keep doing that, then all these things, as the verse says, are almost completely destroyed, although not actually completely. And thus, Krishna consciousness and the mood and the state of mind of remembering Krishna and having an attitude of service towards him, these things become established nicely within you. At least, a very solid beginning is there. So we should do like that, these two things. Hearing and chanting, and serving in the company of devotees and serving the devotees. These two things, as Prabhupada says, these are the remedy for getting free from inauspiciousness. And I've been preparing, I am preparing for teaching Bhaktivedanta. Means going through the Bhagavatam in detail, from the 7th canto onwards. And one thing, there's a few things I've noticed very vividly about how Prabhupada is presenting things. One thing is how much Prabhupada emphasizes again and again and again and then again, hearing and chanting about the Lord, and how much he emphasizes how we are not these bodies, but we're eternal spiritual persons. How often and in how many different ways. It's not just, repeating, oh, you're not this body, and next, oh, you're not this body, and then later on, oh, you're not this body. So many angles of vision on how we're not this body. It's amazing. And it's very convincing because it's extremely clear and logical. It's not just repeating the same thing again and again, but it's like exploring the point in great depth, and really great depth. Yeah, so things like this. If we study Prabhupada's books, hearing and chanting, based on the Bhagavatam, on Bhagavad Gita also, then we notice that the depth which is there in Prabhupada's books, extreme depth. Some people think that, they're devotees, but they're not followers of Prabhupada. That they think, oh, Prabhupada is just very basic. But he's not very basic. I mean, basic things are there, but he goes in such depth, exploring all these essential points which just make up the whole foundation of what is Krishna consciousness. And on the basis of that foundation, we can just easily move forward into the higher levels of Krishna consciousness, but a greater absorption in Krishna consciousness and a greater experience from Krishna consciousness. So let's do these things. Regularly attend classes in the Bhagavatam. And you know, an interesting point. If you somehow stumble upon an old version of the Bhagavatam, like which Prabhupada had printed in India and brought to America in the beginning, then you'll see in translating this verse, Srila Prabhupada just says, by regularly hearing the Bhagavatam. But later he changed that himself to specifically by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam. Means in the association of devotees and in such ways that you really explore the subjects. It's not just superficial, you just hear it and like that, but you actually go deeply into it. Cultivate these types of practices. And if we really do that nicely, by the time our program finishes next week, we'll see that we have changed to some degree. We've actually developed to some degree further. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And Prabhupada here, he mentions what happened with Narada Muni in his previous lifetime, when he was not Narada Muni. He was just a young boy. Of course, he grew up as time went on, but then he died, left his body, and then next life became Narada Muni. But Prabhupada gives him as an example of someone who did exactly this. He was a small boy, maybe 5 or just something like that, just a very small child. And some very advanced devotees came and stayed in his mother's place during the rainy season. And he heard from them. He would just sit there. They would discuss. They would discuss like for hours, every day for 3 months, maybe 4. And he would just sit there and listen. And then he would, so that was one thing. And then he would serve them. He would serve them prasadam. Then he'd clean up after. Sometimes he'd wash their clothes and keep the place where they're staying clean. So he was rendering service to the devotees, to the devotee Bhagavats. And the result of all that was, in due course, he became Narada Muni later. Well, in the meantime, he actually started making significant advancement. But next life, he was Narada Muni, practically the greatest, certainly one of the greatest devotees. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we'll have at 4. Is that okay? Questions and answers? So we want you please to think of a question. I mean, not just sort of mechanically, but something which interests you and something you would really like to learn more about, you know, like that.
And then even Narada Muni did not know, the mother did not know who is the father of the child. It's like, well, I'll try and research and pick the verse.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we go further on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki.